everyone, this is Ashley from the Mito podcast. Today, our guest is my sister, Jamila. She works for the San Diego Community College District in the WorkAbility program. She and her team work very hard in the Community College District to provide services for people with disabilities on a very wide spectrum. So if you listen into our podcast, we talk a little bit about the services that you can get, technology that is used, and a couple of other little tidbits in there. And obviously, we always have our little bit of blooper in the middle. So if you are interested in this, please give this podcast a listen. I think it's great for all ages, for any disabilities. Thank you for listening. Hi, you're listening to the Mito podcast. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Megan.
And today we have my sister, Jamila Bernal-DiCarli. So obviously, I mean, if you've heard our podcast before, you know what my sister's tie is to Mito. It's for my niece, her niece, Angelina. But I really wanted to have her on because of what she does for a living. Sis, do you want to kind of try to explain your background and a little bit about what you do?
Sure, of course. It always seems like the ones that are closest to you don't really have a full scope or a sense of what you actually do at work. So maybe this will be good for your understanding and also maybe just for some folks out there that might have some curiosities about the supports and resources that are available to adults entering or individuals entering adulthood, navigating a disability. So I have worked in the field of disability in education. My background is in vocational rehabilitation. So there's a whole field dedicated to helping individuals with disabilities to transition to the workforce, either for the first time or after, they might have incurred an injury or became disabled later in life and are looking to re-enter the workforce. So there's a whole wonderful field out there that I've been able to work in for over 20 years now. So I have worked with the disability support programs and services departments within the San Diego Community College District. And so half of the time has been spent doing disability management and support counseling. And the other half has basically been managing a program called WorkAbility 3, which provides employment preparation and job placement services to college students with disabilities. And it's a real sweet spot of a job. It's so cool because we get to help people be successful as they're either like in college or exiting college and like kind of working on what's the next step? How do I get there? What do I, what can I do, especially when I'm managing my disability on top of everything else. And so the team that I manage works individually with a wide array of individuals with disabilities. And we assist them with obtaining internships, part-time work, full-time work. Where we're really specialized is we help individuals kind of think through and strategize, knowing and understanding what it is their needs are and what accommodations to request, what kind of conversations to have with employers, how to deal with disclosure, how to ask for what they need. And so we can really provide, really specialized, unique counseling services based on what each person needs. So is that a good overview?
Yeah, no, it's great. And I wanted to point out that everything that we're talking about today primarily has to do with San Diego County. But if you are interested in resources like these, you should definitely reach out to your community college district or whatever it is that's in your area to see if they have something that works similar, which they most likely do. And sometimes these things are really hard to find. And that's why another reason why I wanted to have you on is because we like to uncover all those like hidden things that families don't know about. because you don't know what you don't know. I think that's the thing that we always say on this podcast. You don't know what you don't know until you hear about it. So, and also I know a lot of, so Mito affects all ranges, it's all ages. There's not a child or an adult, like it's across the board. So that's another reason why, because you're in that position of transitioning from childhood to adulthood. And we've had a couple of people on here on the podcast that are old enough to have a job. They are technically an adult, but they don't necessarily know how or are able to kind of adventure themselves into that world. So I think that that's why it's so great to have a you to help them. um, but let's talk a little bit more about like the types of disabilities. Like, could you give me a range of just a few examples? Maybe from like worst case, I don't know if that's the correct terminology, to the lightest case. Does that make sense?
I would say maybe like from least to most severe, maybe.
Yeah, that's way better.
Yeah, it really is. How many times have you said it really depends on the person, right? Or it depends on the situation. But so in the California community college system, so there are services that exist that are mandated in order to help support, individuals that provide documentation and, of their condition or their condition or their disability. And there are disability categories. And so that can range from, mobility disability or physical disability to ADHD has its own category, vision, deaf and hard of hearing. So they're all kind of, there's different categories. Now there's this other category called the other category, just other. And so I'm thinking that something like Mito might fit into like, this kind of like chronic condition or whatnot, under this other category, which is like just like all other things that cannot, be specifically identified because it's either obscure or more rare or one thing I'm learning about coming back to the office is that I have multiple phones and so like I got text over here, got my phone blinking over here. I've got Teams is giving me some message. I actually shut down my email so that I wouldn't get any emails coming up, but it is distracting. So I was talking about disability categories, and what was reminding me of your lead-in question to this? Because
I was asking like least. Well, you said it so much better than I did.
So it just depends on needs, and it depends on like the level of support that someone needs. So like the most common, I guess, if you will, or the largest disability category or group is mental illness, folks with, anxiety or depression or bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. So if you peek into that category, it just really depends on like how well someone may be doing or the level of support that they might need really is contingent upon like how well they're managing their disability and how well they're functioning. And so it could be something that's fairly easily accommodated. Like, I have test anxiety. I get really nervous when I take tests and I forget what I want to, I forget the information. And so, a common accommodation might be extended time for a test that's timed in a private room or a semi-private room that's like quiet, where they're out of the classroom. And so, allowing them to, concentrate better and have more time to account for what's, challenging for them. There could be individuals that have disabilities that are so, now I'm struggling to think of the word, but that are significant, that are severe, that they might need a personal care attendant to come with them to school. So where disability services they sort of have a line with like what they can provide, and it's in the academic educational environment, and they can authorize like an individual to come, like a nurse or nursing assistant or personal aide, to come with the person to the classroom, and basically just giving them access and permission to have that person. But they do not provide anything that's hands-on, that's considered like, medical. They might provide like a note taker or the technology to record and take notes in class. But in terms of like, someone that might be a wheelchair user, maybe limited mobility, quadriplegic, or might be on a vent, or need some significant care, that's something that they can have access to, but they're really kind of left to their own resources to be able to provide that. So I guess, it might be someone who just needs a little extra time for tests versus someone who needs assistance to get out their books and to take notes and to turn pages, and to, while they're on campus, be supported with, any medical, call it medical, but it's just really life needs, right? It's just what we need to do to be able to live our lives. So I've seen some students that have had really challenging disabilities be very successful. And the whole goal, the whole mission of disability services is to remove barriers and to provide equitable access to their education. Is that always provided and always the case? Of course, everybody, we try. I think San Diego is pretty phenomenal in terms of like the community resources that it offers in the community colleges in the area. I have to say this, of course, as I'm like sitting in the building of the San Diego Community College District. But no, I work with some pretty amazing, dedicated individuals, and there are so many things that are, understated or kept hidden that you wouldn't know about. There's a lot of great things that we provide. But you're mentioning that too. It's like, you don't know what you don't know until you start digging and asking questions. And it's like, oh, how did I not know this was a thing or a service? Or yeah.
I was just going to say that I think too, like you said, if you don't know, I know right now Troy is in 8th grade and he's going to be transitioning to high school. So each time there's this transition that's even closer to adulthood, it's kind of a scary thing. I mean, we don't really know what the programs are going to be like in high school. And even when you think about, going into adulthood, we think about all these different things with our, medically fragile children, or, just disabled children in general. We have IEPs now, which are in the school districts, that allow them to get all the services and the different things. And, when you think about high school or you think about college and things like that, it's not really known what the services really are. And so I know obviously there's people like you, which I'm thankful for, that, we can check into and figure it out. But it's definitely a scary thing for parents when you continue to plan for the future for your child and you're just not really sure. So I don't even know, do they do things like IEPs in college? Do they carry stuff like that through? I mean, it's an individualized education plan, but I don't know, if those hold up, or if, like you said, you can have certain people do different things for you, but do those transfer over?
That's a wonderful question. And it's, it really kind of highlights the lack of information and the lack of communication that happens, or that doesn't happen, with K through 12 and the college system, because we find that there are so many changes, and there's so many, it's a completely different way of getting what you need. So it's a great question, actually. I'm happy to cover that. So you mentioned the IEP, or the individualized,
Education plan.
Individual educate. Oh, wait. I'm okay. Here's one thing. We always, when I work with Department of Rehab, and they develop IPEs.
Oh, okay.
And so you have to do this mental check of like, okay, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about IEP. So So individualized education plan, is that what
Yeah.
it is? Yeah, I'm not, yeah, it's so funny. Well, so the IEP is, the document, that identifies, the plan and the services and it is an agreement with the school and the family, for what services their child will get. So when they either graduate high school or they disconnect, if they haven't graduated, they are still covered under the same laws up until the age of 22, at which point, service or provision of and access to services and resources with the school systems, it changes to Section 504 of the Rehab Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so the IEP is a document that an individual can take, and I do mean the individual. They can voluntarily sign up for services. Can't tell you how many ticked off moms and dads have been turned away from the offices because they're used to advocating for services for their child, right? So then they go to college and they're like, oh yes, I'd like to make an appointment with no, your son or your daughter has to make the appointment. And of course they can assist, but that person has to, the student has to voluntarily apply for services. So that document is absolutely fine, and it's something that's very recognized and acceptable. If they are encountering a condition that has changed or have a new diagnosis that is not reflected on that document, and what they need is really tied to that newer diagnosis, then they would be encouraged to provide a doctor's report, an assessment, anything from a practitioner that they're working with that really outlines like the functional limitations and what the needs are in the academic environment. So, but yeah, it can totally work. It's just, it's voluntary. The individual has to apply for services. They have to sign a release for parents to be a point of contact or be involved. And it's just a very different world because no one is going to be calling them and reminding them or making sure that they did all the things they need to do. It's all on the student, which is such a role reversal in terms of like they've been shepherded along and kind of told where to show up and who their resource provider is or which classroom they're going to get this support or service, and they don't really get the practice of self-advocacy. And so when they go to college, the parents are used to serving in that role, and they're told, it's almost kind of like a slap in the face, like, you're not needed anymore, or that's not your role anymore. And it's so hard on the parents. But I love when families are involved because I think you really need to work as a team together, especially if you're dealing with, a more severe disability. It's going to take a village. It's going to take a team approach. And so I really highly encourage parents to continue to be involved, but also try to encourage and engage their child in a way that they can be more independent, because that's the ultimate goal.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I obviously didn't get to have a lot of experience with IEPs because Angie was so young, but is there so I know you can bring your IEP with you if you're making your own appointment, but is there a college level IEP like assessment? Is that a valid question?
It's a very good question. And actually that's a big difference too, because the onus is on, the responsibility is on the K through 12 system to do a majority of the assessments, with the exception of some higher level evaluations. Like I think autism might be one that they encourage like a psychiatrist, like a professional psychiatrist outside the school to assess, but I'm not entirely sure. But the community college does not provide nearly the extent of services for purpose of like evaluation. They may have access to evaluation of learning disabilities. So dyslexia, dyscalculia, auditory processing disorder. So it is the community college learning disability model that was developed at the state chancellor's office for community colleges. And so that is something that not every college provides. So it's a little bit difficult to answer. I will say that there are several colleges in our region that do offer the testing, which I think is 2 different batteries of intelligence quotients and performance tests. And so, what that can determine is if somebody, qualifies per that model, the community college model, to be considered to have a learning disability. So I would say for folks that this is an effective tool for someone that may have not been diagnosed at a young age and may have struggled in school. Maybe like, typical learning disability experience might be like, I read the same thing like 3 times and I just doesn't stick. And I study just as hard. I studied 3-4 times as hard as my counterparts. And I get like a C. I work my butt off to get a C on a test, and everyone else gets like, an A. They feel like they've been told that they were dumb or lazy or all these negative things. And then when they get this, diagnosis, and it's like typically I see college students and in their 20s and 30s, even later sometimes in life, if they go back for educational purposes later, and they get this diagnosis and they're like, oh, it makes so much sense. Like, it's so validating. Like, I've been struggling this whole time. But that is, one of the valuable resources that could be provided in the college setting. But I would say pretty much if you're coming in with a diagnosis already, you bring that in and, you get what you need. And there's pretty much a kind of a, I don't know, drop down menu of like, these are the types of accommodations we can authorize for you to use in college. And, but yeah, we do have some, I think, different types of situations where, more creative, kind of customized approach is needed. So it really just depends on the individual.
I know that like when I talked about Troy going to high school, eventually we will be having a transition meeting, which will be with the other special education department from the high school and Troy's teacher and myself to give us an idea of the programs and things that they offer. Do the community colleges do that with the high schools? For instance, is there like an open house for the disability programs that are available at the community college, or do they actually go to the high schools in the area and inform them about that information?
That's these are great questions. It depends on the district, and it depends on the colleges, and it depends on how rampant COVID is, I guess, because that has really changed over the past couple of years. But there are tours that the high schools can request of the college outreach department / DSPS, or Disability Support Programs and Services Department. And it's really meant to be kind of a specialized approach to reaching out to students and letting them know, in addition to navigating this completely new college environment, it's like, here's all the other stuff you got to do too, but it's almost laughable that it's gonna like one night, like, and it's usually called transition night, like that's what it's called. And it's either like they would do, oh my gosh, I used to do so many of these, and they get like a big gym or a big building at one of the school sites, and they'd cram all of us in there, and we'd each have a table, and parents and their kids are walking around. They're like, what do you offer? What do you have? What do you have going on? And it was like, we gave out so much information, and these parents, their kids are like, they don't care. They're walking around, they don't, they're just like, trying to, it's social for them. Their parents are like, give me all your flyers. I want to know what, because they're scared, especially if it's like getting up to senior year and they're like, I don't know what's next for my kid. So yeah, they try to cram it all into one big transition night, which is just, it's overwhelming for everybody. But there are outreach tours and campus tours that can be arranged like per the school. So if that was something that, that's something that parents could be asking about. And it could be for Mesa College, for City College, for Miramar, for Cuyamaca, for Grossmont, and each college is going to be a little bit different and approach that a little bit differently. But I don't think it's enough. Like, I really don't feel, and I feel like our departments do a lot, and they're busy, they're overwhelmed, but we should have a better approach for transition students, because I feel like that first semester, that first year, it's challenging. And like a lot of times the students, they won't self-advocate and they won't ask for what they need. So then they're bottoming out, they're getting Fs in their first semester, and we're not setting them up for success. So there are regional partnership meetings that occur in San Diego and in East County. And I'm forgetting the name, but it's basically like, K through 12 professionals, the Department of Rehabilitation, the Department of Developmental Services, I think, Regional Center, and then programs like mine or other work-based programs come and discuss like what's going on regionally and what kind of efforts are taking place to onboard the students or prepare the students, if you will. I just don't think it's ever been, I'm not critical of any one particular institution, but it's just, it's obvious that there's work to be done in that area.
I have a question that might be kind of hard to answer, but since you've been in this position for so long, 20 years is a big span of time of like being in a program, which is amazing. And I know that there's been a lot of changes based on services and things like that, but based on the need for it, has that changed drastically in the last 20 years? So I don't know, do you understand my question?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to respond to it. And so a lot of things have stayed the same. I think a lot of what has changed is, well, I think of two things. One is like the technology. So adaptive assistive technology obviously has changed a lot in the last even 5 years, but that has been revolutionary, I think, for people with vision, learning, processing challenges. I think that it's like you can't ever really fix something that does, it's like, but if you could get a thing, and if you could objectify like how to fix something or how to accommodate someone, like, in an object or a software or something, like that's where we've had a really great impact. I actually started in assistive technology back in, I don't know, was it San Diego State? And it was like 1997, 96 or something. And it was like, I'm learning these, and I was not a computer person. And I was like, email, what's this email thing? Like that was when like email was becoming commonplace. And it's so, gosh, I sound so old, so funny. But yeah, the technology, we basically, we have so many amazing things at our fingertips that we can give to our students, or that can be purchased, by families or by Department of Rehabilitation, or with community grants and such. But the technology has changed. I think another big shift that has changed is the focus is shifting away from the medical model of disability, and really kind of getting away from like the person's like diagnosis, or they are being there is this thing that is fundamentally wrong or challenged, or that is that is the focus of the person, right? And we're really kind of shifting away from that into like a disability as part of someone's identity. They're a person first. So it's not like, you know, and a lot of that is like how we regard people in our language, right? So, you know, even like the title of our departments have shifted, like, you know, disabled student services. And it's like, you know, we were kind of taught that that's how you refer to people, but it's like, oh, that's disability first. That's like they're disabled. So instead of that, like making a shift to, you know, disability support, or, you know, in person with a disability. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of different schools of thought on that, because like some people from the disability community will proudly say like, I am autistic. And, you know, some person first language folks are like, oh, you're supposed to say person with autism, like their disability does not define them. But it really opens up room for conversations to be had with the person, and like, how are they comfortable identifying? Because there's going to be some folks that will never walk through the door because it says disability or disabled, and they're like, that's not me. Mm-hmm. But when you have a conversation with them, and like, you know, yeah, I get that that's not part of like, you know, how you feel, who you are, it doesn't define you, but you could say that you do have a barrier, you do have needs. And so it's all about like getting access, right?
It's also just being with who's around you growing up too, like having exactly what you're saying, having that focus in the way that it is being spoken to, where you might be embarrassed to try and get help or get those needs because of the stigmatism that you grew up in. And I can see that definitely with maybe like an older generation having that hard time of doing that.
It's painful. Kids are mean in high school, like, and I feel for Troy, like going, because like I cringe when I think about high school, and I'm like this fully able-bodied, like, you know, I got to participate in all the things, and I, you know, yeah, I was kind of shy, but it wasn't like, it was hard. It's hard on all of us. So you think about like, you know, somebody with additional like, you know, stigmas, and just like the fact that kids can be so mean, and they are also othered, like they are kept away. And I don't know if like Troy is mainstreamed or if he, you know, has a completely separate learning environment. But like I was listening to another podcast, I can't recall who it was, but they were talking about, oh, I know who it was. It was Judy Heumann. She's the civil rights advocate and an activist, and she was talking about how like she hates the term special education. Like it just needs to be education, and it needs to be inclusive. So the fact that like, you know, kids see other kids with differences, right? And then they get out into college in the community, and it's not such a othering aspect. Like it's not like them and us. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but it's like, reel me back in here, Ashley. I
think that's actually a super important tangent, because
yeah,
that is such a big thing. Troy is actually, he's on a home hospital program just because we don't want him exposed to illnesses. But just in general, it is such a separate thing. Special education, kids in special ed, it is seen as such a separate thing. And I think, you know, disabled, if you want to say that, people with disabilities in general, like you said, they're not out and about everywhere. People aren't exposed to relationships with people that have a disability as often. And I know even when Troy was younger, I had a woman come up to me, and she was super sweet, and she was being very nice and positive, but she was like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing that you take him out everywhere and you do these things with him. And, you know, I was very nice and said, well, of course, you know, he's my son and he wants to experience everything else as well. And it's just such an interesting thing that, you know, I feel like in education, you know, there is the mainstreaming, but you have to fight for that. And your child usually has to fit a certain type of situation to be allowed into the class, or have certain, you know, specific things that they can do. And so that being separate makes it to where we don't know about all these things. And as parents, we don't know about these services. And because it's just, everything is so separate. And so I think, that brings up a good point, that if it was more generalized and it was just education and special ed students, the students with disabilities were, out among all the other students, that it would just be more normalized, if you want to say, and it would do such an amazing thing for everyone's character. I know Troy was in a preschool, and it was amazing because it had kids that were, typical students, and then it had students with special needs. And these typical functioning children were amazing, and they were so amazing with the kids with special needs. And I know that that makes them, a better person, and how they were, act in society, and how they grow up, and just being exposed to that. So now I just went off on your same tangent.
No, it reminds me, see, this is good. This is good. I'm like, what was my point? But it doesn't matter because you're here now. So no, the most annoying thing about when people find out about I talk about what I do, and they're like, oh, that's so nice. Like, you're so, like, isn't that rewarding? And it's like, I don't think
Oh yeah, what are you doing with your life?
Or it takes such a special person to do that.
Like, we are helping college students with disabilities, and they're like, they go to college? Like, it's like it's wrong. It's wrong. It's like, no, it's a lack of understanding. It's due to a lack of exposure, which really needs to start at a young age.
It's ignorance. And it's not by a person's fault. It's like what you said, they're not exposed to that. They don't understand that.
Well, I work really hard. I'm going to be working really hard to expose my little kids to a lot of different types of people, and one thing we do every 2 weeks is I bring my son to a walk, stroll, and rock. Oh gosh, I've only been going for like, I don't know, a year now. I can't remember what it's called. A walk, stroll, and roll. And so it's driven by the efforts of the Spinal Network of San Diego. And they really want to just have people who, have physical challenges, able-bodied, like anybody's welcome. And we just go for a walk. And it's this sort of small legion of wheelchair users. And last week was really fun because Julian, my son, he's, pretty typical, almost 5-year-old, and he'll ride his bike. And one of the gentlemen who has a power wheelchair said, hey, do you want to ride? Like, is it okay if I give him a ride? And Julian looked at me, his eyes got real big, and I was like, yeah, sure, Jim, if that's okay. So I said, how? He's like, just put him on my lap. So I put Julian on his lap, and away they went. And Julian had his first wheelchair ride, and he is never going to ride his bike again, I think, because that was so much more fun. But point being, like, it's normal that we go out and see Rick and Rusty and Jim and that, and Jesus and the guy, the guys that they just happen to all be guys, but we're open to women too, but I think I'm the only lady there now that I think about it. But anyway, it's so fun. And I think it's so important in terms of, visibility in all aspects, whether it's in education, in the media, just knowing this aspect of our population that, we don't get to see or hear from, they don't really get a voice. And so that's why I think, doing podcasts like this it's, you're representing a very small piece of the disability community, but I think it's wonderful what you do. And, just kind of uncovering, different things that can help different people.
So I know that should be exactly where we stop, but I have one last question. So I want to go back to the comparison of now to 20 years ago, but are you finding today that people are being more, that's not a good sentence. Are you seeing more people with a diagnosis than you did like over the years? Like, wow, I wish that I had better words for the
Like,
day.
are more people accessing the services? Like, are
Yeah, I guess
more-
so. I guess my train of thought is, since having Angie, I have met, I mean, I automatically, obviously I've met a lot of Mito people, but beyond Mito people or Mito families, I'm meeting more and more people just getting a diagnosis for something. Like in my new job, the first few people that I met, the first few people I spoke to, every single one of them has a child with special needs, whether it's dyslexia or autism, but every single person. Whereas, and I don't know if it's because I had Angie, so I'm maybe more hyper tuned to it, but I could not say that 10 years ago. So do you think that people are, I guess that is a good question, accessing it more? Like, are you seeing more people with a diagnosis than you did? Or like, is the medical field becoming better at diagnosing people?
So basically, is your population growing? The people that
I guess that would have been such an easier way to say it.
I think that definitely a couple of the areas that we're seeing growth is like the autism spectrum is, I mean, first of all, we had to sort of create a new category in the community colleges because it was in the other category, right? And they had like this category under speech and language. Do you know how many speech and language college students we were serving? Like 2 a year. And so, but then we were like, I wonder, let's actually look at how many people, same with ADHD, it was in the other category. We never had data on it. And so they created ADHD and autism. And those are two, I was just looking at some statistics this morning that my supervisor was sharing at this like new database that allows us to look at this data. And those two areas have really escalated. And I think part of it is the awareness, and I think that it's there's a bit of a buzz about autism and ADHD. You see a lot of information readily available on these two areas, where that was never the case before. It was never talked about before. Now it is like, it's almost like a little bit like autism is one of the more popular disabilities. Like oh yeah, someone knows someone who knows someone, right? And I think that because it's being more talked about, it's being that people are more comfortable with like seeking a diagnosis, or at least the medical community is more heightened to, oh, okay, we know that here are the indicators that we can look at for pre-screening to once they get older. But I think that those are two large areas of growth, or at least identification, that it's not like the people weren't there before, but it's like now we're tuned into it. I was going to say something else in that regard. It's like I think of things when you're asking a question, you're talking like, oh yeah, I need to, and then I forget. But I think that probably happens all the time with you too.
It's usually me. and
that's
trying
why
to
we have our
form
paper and
sentences.
pen.
Yeah.
If I think of it, I'll spit it back out.
Yeah, that's okay. Megan, did you have any other questions?
No, not really. I think you answered quite a few of mine, and I just appreciate what you do. And like you said, it would be nice if we put your information up on our website, or your department's information, just so people that have children that might be transitioning to the community college, that they have somewhere to look for at least some information and get an idea. Because like you said, there's not much awareness about it, and people think, oh, disabled people don't necessarily go to community college, or where would my child be able to? So that would be nice.
And sometimes if you don't see it, you don't know it's a possibility, and that's a real travesty. So I mean, I think we all need to aim for higher visibility and vocality, just being out there and talking and sharing. So yeah, and I think about Troy, and I think about what that's going to be like. I mean, just even transitioning to high school and stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
I know. I'm like, can we just hold him back in 8th grade, because he stay in middle school forever. We love our teacher. We love the programs.
Yeah.
but yeah, that's not happening.
Well,
Don't be so smart, Troy.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you taking time and joining us on the podcast. And of course, for being my lovely sister.
Yes.
And an amazing auntie to Angie.
yeah. Well, thank you I'm honored to be here. I was so surprised. I was like, are you reaching the bottom of the barrel? Like, why are you reaching out to me? Like, are you running out of people? So,
No, we just really felt like this was something that was important that people needed to hear about, because like I said earlier, I mean, and like you said, every diagnosis is every person is totally different with their diagnosis, and everyone that knows about Mito understands that. I mean, you could have the same genetic code and have completely different symptoms. I mean, we've had people on here that are 32 years old with Lee syndrome, whereas Angie was not even 2 years old. So there's just such a wide spectrum and ages that people just don't know what's out there. And the one thing that I'm finding more and more too is that kids are living longer, which is great. And the adults are now being diagnosed more often. And it's something that was considered maybe a chronic illness or fatigue is finally, like, science is finally getting to the point of being able to diagnose mitochondrial dysfunction. And so what that looks like is what people are going to need going into high school, into college, into finding the workforce, which I didn't ask you questions about that. Maybe another time.
I think what a good topic would be is like if we talked really about employment, and I could even have somebody from the Department of Rehab on if you wanted to. I don't know if you do more than 2 guests at a time or 1 guest at a time,
Yeah,
but
We do.
I could have somebody come in and speak about their services and their process and everything. You could do a whole, session on that.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I think that's a wonderful idea, because I think it's a growing need and something that parents need to hear, or they need to know that there is a future, that your child isn't their diagnosis, and kids beat the odds. And so you need to prepare yourself for all levels. So being able to talk to people like you, I think is integral to just the family plan, like you said, having that team, those people that are behind you. And it all starts with the parent and guiding their child and knowing that these resources are there. And maybe just opening their minds to something that needs to start in their community. I mean, I know not every community is going to be like San Diego, but being able to talk to and hear about these things, like knowing, oh, someone has started this, or someone is doing this method, or has this organized, we need to start that here for the future of our kids. And that's what it's all about, is getting those resources, creating them for every community, and just having them readily available for everyone across the board. But thank you. We'll have to arrange another podcast to go over that. But thank you for being on the podcast today. I love you. If you guys are listening, this is the Mito podcast. If you have any ideas, or if you would like to write in, you can contact us at mitopodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and on Instagram and YouTube. And you can listen to us on Apple or Spotify. I think that's it. Did I cover it all, Megan?
Yeah, you did.
I think by now I'd write all this stuff down so I wouldn't miss it. Nope. All right. I hope that you guys all have a wonderful day.